From the CISO Series, it's cybersecurity headlines.
The intern did it. Did SolarWinds throw an intern under the bus? The Tom Cruise deepfakes. What does this mean for world peace? And how to maximize malware by boosting a victim's SEO first. These are just three of the stories that my colleagues and I have been bringing to you this week on the daily editions of the Cybersecurity Headlines podcast. But now we get a chance for some insight, some opinion, and some expertise from our guest, who this week is John Overbaugh, who is the VP of Security for CareCentrix. So, John, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Steve. Good to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you, and I just want to say it's as usual. This has been a very, very busy week, and so we've got a lot to talk about. In 20 minutes, we have to talk about these things. Just before we get into these stories, I want to just remind everybody that our sponsor for this week's episode is TrustMap, and I will be talking about them very shortly as well. And if you are joining us live, please feel free to join us on Crowdcast, where you can introduce your own comments, and we may even be able to get them into the show. So, John, let's get started here. The first story that I want to share with you from our collection here, once again, is the gift that keeps on giving. This is SolarWinds, and last week, just by the last weekend, the SolarWinds CEO blamed an intern for a weak password, SolarWinds 123, which they're blaming the intern for this lapse in password security that went apparently undiagnosed or unknown for a couple of years. As soon as it was reported, it was corrected within a few days. But I guess my question here is why the company's technology allows for these kinds of passwords in the first place. There's a lot in this story to unravel. So what would you like to talk about?
Well, let's start first with the simple fact. It's not uncommon to uncover additional compromises when you're researching an incident. So I'm not surprised more things came up. 3 days to correct a password, though, that does seem like it's a little bit excessive. The only thing to think about, though, is we're not in the war room. We don't know what they're really dealing with in the war room. I would hope that, a public password like this would be their biggest problem, but we don't know for sure. Bottom line for me is it's pretty obvious that let's try that again. It's not necessarily obvious, but it seems like they're trying to avoid responsibility by placing it on an intern, someone unnamed who's gone in history. But I don't think they're doing themselves any favors with this.
No, I mean, this is a tragedy rather than something that people are going to point fingers and
Yeah.
I think adopt real blame. It's an unseen and huge viral spread. But I think from a management and leadership standpoint, it's maybe a bit of a foul ball to blame somebody who's anonymous and powerless.
Yeah.
But so be it. And again, it just keeps on sort of growing and going. And I think it's just stern warning to us all about what's lying out there. So moving on to Go malware, which is something that's a little bit doesn't get a lot of airplay, really. Go malware, which is created by Google, has seen a 2,000% increase because it's been adopted once again by the bad guys, e-crime groups, who have started to move away from C and C++ to use Go as their programming language of choice. It's apparently an easy cross-platform compilation. It is difficult to reverse engineer by the security people, and it's overall just a better programming language. So in your experience, how prevalent is Go or Golang? Is it something that we should know more about?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, look, it's one of several new languages that are popping up here and there. There's kind of a goal or a windmill, if you will, that teams tilt at. Make it so a graphic designer can build a secure, scalable, highly available enterprise or consumer application. The challenge isn't one language in particular, like Go or Golang, but more the concept that the security team has to really run to keep up with all the new languages. So tools we rely on to automate our job, like static application security testing, they all lag behind on these new languages. So honestly, I'd rather my company missed out on a year or two of these new languages in their childhood development than jump in before the security infrastructure can adopt. On the other hand, as an attacker, I'm going to look for the newest code that is best obfuscated and best hidden. So in that aspect, it certainly is popular and rising in popularity among the group you don't want it to.
I mean, it's never an easy job to be on the security side of anything because the hackers and the bad guys just keep finding new ways of just getting in.
Right.
It's kind of like, water in the basement foundation. So
Hmm.
yeah, it's just another wake up call to another piece of language to watch out for. But moving from that, another hacker story, but one that I particularly love, I think, is that hackers are now giving websites great SEO before actually installing malware upon them, which I
Hmm.
think is kind of like fattening up a victim before injecting poison into them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Remarkable approach. So I guess my question is, I mean, I never want to sort of condone or praise their activities, but it's always fascinating to observe the kinds of brilliance or ingenuity that the bad guys are looking to do. But
Yeah.
it makes me wonder why they have to be doing this. Is this increase in kind of external activities? I mean, taking all
Mhm.
that effort to blow up websites with SEO before basically hacking them or infecting them, it's kind of on par with social engineering, all the effort you have to do to social engineer. So
Right.
does this make you feel like perhaps hackers have for a moment met their match, that they've got to keep pounding on the outside of the walls now because as compared to straight up hacking, they have hit a wall and they got to just be more creative?
Well, I actually don't think that that's the case. I think really, whatever we do, we always lean toward the easiest solution. And hacking, when it started out, kind of what we would call core hacking, it's become a little bit more difficult just because there's so many controls in place. Operating systems are starting to become better locked down. I won't say perfectly locked down, but better. And as an attacker, I'm going to go wherever it's easiest for me to attack. Another thing to keep in mind that there's so much competition today among the black hat economy that the best
Mhm.
players are recruiting top talent and they're building actual software solutions and products. So have they met their match? No. But when one door is closed, they'll either find or just build themselves another one and move forward.
Yeah, yeah, and that just seems to, again, it's just the requirement. We were speaking before we went on air about using Twitter or not using Twitter as a source of information, and this for myself anyway. I just find that it's one of the ways you can just keep track of some of these kinds of stories is that
Yeah,
there's so much out there. It's about not knowing what you don't know and just finding out where they're turning to next.
that's right. Yep.
So let's have a look then at China. Once again, not looking to do a Tom Clancy thing here, but apparently China was behind this massive power outage in Mumbai last week, and this was, a regional challenge perhaps, but there was 10 Indian power sector organizations and some seaport operators that got hit with malware.
Yeah.
So finding out that China's behind that, I mean, there's a question that might be as to why they're doing this. There maybe it could be a direct hit, or it could be one of these sleeper tests to see how it works, kind of like a
Mhm.
Stuxnet type of thing. You test it somewhere else first. But what it
Right.
makes me wonder about is, we just got through the whole Texas freeze out with the power going out and so forth, which is not related to hacking per se, but
Mhm.
revealed potential weaknesses in an infrastructure. And then
Yeah.
last week we were speaking about Silver Sparrow, a sleeper software that people aren't quite sure what it's going to do. So would you see something like this as a kind of a canary in the coal mine, letting you know, hey, there's stuff going on that may be a Stuxnet type test out there in the Indian power sector?
Yeah. Well, my answer might go in a slightly different direction, but look, we're beginning to see the coming together of kinetic and electronic warfare. I'm not an expert on Chinese hacking. I'm not qualified to confirm the claims that were made. But to me, this has alarming ramifications for information security, both in the public as well as the private sector. So the tools behind the attack, sleeper malware, they're nothing new, but there's still a creative approach to avoiding detection. The strategy is what concerns me, right? So around the world, the private sector historically has only had to worry about kinetic warfare. So they've gone about happily creating their widgets and pouring expensive coffees for patrons and so forth, in spite of conflict in what they consider to be far off lands. What does an auto rickshaw driver in Mumbai care about a conflict on a border almost 15,000 kilometers away?
Hmm.
Up until now, probably nothing, but that's changing a lot. So this kind of attack could be a diversion. It has happened
Yeah.
in the Indo-Chinese border wars and so forth. So I think it has a lot. We really need to pay attention to this and understand what's going on there.
Excellent insight. Absolutely. So let's take a moment here and just acknowledge our sponsor for this week's session. And our sponsor this week is TrustMap. And so TrustMap is a regular sponsor for a lot of the shows we do, and what they're providing right now is a maturity assessment profile and plan. We're inviting you to learn the MAPP methodology for managing security as a business. So while information security itself has undergone a convulsive change in coalescing around maturity-based management of key business processes, the MAP approach provides a practical implementation of this maturity model. They have a white paper that describes a 3-step maturity-centric approach, and this is maturity assessment, a profile, and a plan, MAPP. And an information security map, they say, empowers, and this is what they're all about, is empowering the CISO to evaluate and track and report and strategize the organization's security priorities. So we invite you to visit them at trustmap.com and download their paper and see what it's all about. So that is trustmap, trustmapp.com. I am now going to bring John back so we can pick up on the next stories. And once again, it's nice to come back to a juicy one. Tom Cruise. We had Tom Cruise, the deep fake that came out on TikTok, 3 of them actually.
Mm-hmm.
And this has really taken a lot of experts by surprise by the sheer quality of this deep fake. It's extremely difficult to just figure out that it is indeed a deep fake at all, or that it's not him. It's gone viral, and the experts are saying this is one of the most convincing examples of the validity of fake videos yet produced. So obviously that's a cool thing in its own way when it's Tom Cruise doing magic tricks. But my question, John, is what happens if the next one is the announcement of a nuclear strike being put out by our president or by Kim Jong-un or anybody else, where you've only got 3 minutes to really decide if this is real or not? The creator of the deepfake said this is his sort of shrugging shoulders moment, saying people just should learn to be skeptical about everything that they see. But do you see that as a legitimate approach to such a sophisticated piece of media?
Well, I have to admit, I think that the publicity that this is receiving is a good thing, because it will get people to start thinking and wondering. Look, it's a $1 billion question. I mean, really, honestly, how do we hack the human and help them apply a healthy dose of skepticism? The videos were astounding. It was nearly impossible to tell they aren't real. I think the only giveaway was an identical laugh in each of the videos in multiple locations, right? But in an era where Americans are prone to believe anything they hear from any source claiming to be a news agency, somehow we've got to teach ourselves to question the source of the message, what the message is saying, and everything about the experience that we're having. I don't know what the answer is at this point. Really, this is a tough story that really has me concerned.
The identical laugh. I didn't actually see that part. You know what that made me think of when you said that was in The Matrix, when the cat walked by twice. Perhaps that's what it is. Maybe we can just get some AI and some ML working here to watch for those signature repeat pieces as a way to pull these out. So I wasn't aware of that. That's very cool. Well, we'll see how it goes. But I mean, this is, again, people don't have a lot of attention span, so they're going to make judgments on what they see right away. So let's look now at something maybe a little less sexy than Tom Cruise, but looking at dependency confusion.
Yeah.
And this is a story that we actually reported on last week, where at the time it was more of an experimental thing, but repositories, GitHub type repositories, are kind of emerging. I don't want to say as an Achilles heel, but they have a weakness now in that the components that people can download from these repos to use, it's been shown that they can be actually duplicated. The file names of these things can be duplicated so that an infected component can be downloaded instead. This last time we reported on this story, it was just a story about that concept, but now it is being seen that it's happening in the wild. These things are being downloaded and detected, but being downloaded first. So my question, John, is just about GitHub and these kinds of repositories. How important are they? And should we be looking more at how they can tighten their own security in terms of the products that they carry, or is that not possible?
Well, so number one, they're super important, right? Probably 75% or more of the applications in use today would fail if their dependencies were pulled, right? So more and more enterprise apps are being built out of these third-party libraries, pulled from the repositories. So, how can we secure them? Look, I'm sure that GitHub would love to have a way to determine whether or not developer A and developer B which one of them is doing the right thing and doing the wrong thing. But there's a lot of code out there, and they don't own the project, so that's a bit of a challenge there. I think the best bet in tightening security really is to continue to integrate those packages, but for each organization using them to stage them for review prior to integrating those updates. Running them through static code analysis might assist as well, given that most SaaS solutions look for credential theft and other common activities in the source code itself. So I think the burden of securing ourselves from these repos, from malicious repos, that burden rests on the end integrator. Almost said end user, but the end integrator, the developer using the actual library.
Okay. All right. That's interesting. Again, the more people in the supply chain, of course, the more risk there is for these variabilities. But this is just drawing attention to them. And it's not the first time we've heard things being stored on repositories that have caused some problems. So, okay. So the burden still is basically at the end of this chain as opposed to in the middle.
Yep, I think so.
Okay. Now, Eric Schmidt doesn't think we are prepared for competition with China in the artificial intelligence field. A commission was put out, a report by the National Security Commission on Artificial Intelligence, and former Google CEO Eric Schmidt said that he believes that China is catching up with the US on AI, and he was suggesting that more government involvement is required. This is in the case of establishing bodies to oversee this, and also to establish more of a supply chain of civil service technicians to be more educated in AI. So from your perspective, are you seeing this happening? Are you seeing examples of a lag in AI ability on the US side of the industry, or is this just simply looking further ahead at two horses in a race?
Yeah, I think we're looking further ahead. We've got two horses in the race. I think you might say we're still somewhat in the lead there, but we're clearly not playing on a level playing field. The Chinese economy, scientific research, technology is all very heavily influenced by their government. Now, I personally have some doubts and concerns about the efficiency of government involvement here in the United States, but supporting private industry and educational institutions and holding them accountable for outcome, that seems to me like a good idea. And I do think we need to try to accelerate and push past again. It's an interesting era where we are competing against countries where the government is so involved, and we have to look at strategies to keep up in an efficient manner.
Yeah, it does seem that that is a big problem because you do have a sort of an ideological rift sometimes in some organizations between private enterprise and government overseeing too much. And
Yeah,
you're quite right. There's so many countries in the world where it is all government. So, I mean, this of course, is a horse race with a lot of horses and a very big track. I mean, AI
yeah,
is a huge thing. But, I tend to want to listen to someone like Eric Schmidt because it's just
yeah.
like listening to Mark Andreessen or many others. These are the fathers
The
and the
visionaries.
grandfathers of the industry, right?
That's
So,
right.
okay, well, we have to keep an eye on that one. And while we do so, the state of Virginia has moved into the GDPR territory. They have just now established a Consumer Data Protection Act. It's been signed into law to take effect on January the 1st, 2023. So still a little bit of time left. But it has requirements that allows consumers to receive copies to amend or delete personal data, as well as letting them opt out of using data for marketing purposes. So we're
Mhm.
now seeing the thin edge of the wedge of states starting to do this individually, of course, following California. But let's look ahead. Imagine that we've got ourselves a number of states that are all doing this independently. Is this going to bring on some chaos in terms of everyone having their own set of rules and regulations?
I think it will in the short term. Look, this has to be done. Americans have a right to privacy, and Washington has been less than reluctant to address it. Multiple states addressing it are going to raise enough of a ruckus on the Hill that legislators are going to be forced to respond. And finally, we'll have unified federal legislation on this one.
Okay, well, it's interesting to see it happening, but you know what? Oh, wait a second. What's that? I'm hearing my dot matrix printer, my high-tech dot matrix printer, telling me we're in the lightning round now. We've got to wrap this up with the last two stories as quickly as possible to keep on our timeline. So, quick question here. Exchange server 0 days exploited in the
Yeah.
wild, and CISA is issuing emergency fix them now directive. The question here is that maybe we don't have to have Patch Tuesdays every 2 Tuesdays or every month anymore, but is it time for us to move into Patch Tuesdays every week to try and keep up with these kinds of things happening?
Steve, I think for critical patches and 0 days, companies need to expect more frequent updates. And I think it's a good thing, right? We don't want to wait too long. In fact, most organizations probably already have the ability to turn a critical patch around in 72 hours or less. And I think if you don't, you need to develop that ability. For standard patches, not as much. Criticals and 0 days, yeah.
Yeah, so it's just to speed things up. Okay, and so our last story in the same way, T-Mobile disclosing data breaches after a SIM swapping attacks. This is the fifth data breach disclosed by T-Mobile during the last 4 years, and we're getting into SIM swapping, which used to be something that was more in areas like Brazil and Africa, but the data is there to allow people to actually do this kind of hacking on phone cards. Is it that easy to deploy in North America with our telephone systems, or is this an outlier story, or is this something else we've got to watch carefully?
No, I think it's easy enough. I mean, a lot of this depends on social engineering, and that's a worldwide thing, and it's no less prevalent in the US than elsewhere. So, for as long as there are people and there's something to gain from them, there will be cons out there trying to do this. That's why organizations are urging users to move away from SMS based multi factor authentication to use a
Yeah.
token based system such as Authenticator.
Yes, yeah, and that again is still a big battle just to do 2FA with the phone.
Yeah.
Just acknowledging for a second, Jason Connors is saying that imagine when we are doing deep fake testing like we do phishing testing today. So I mean that's an interesting loaded statement there as to where we
Yeah.
can do that. So we got to wrap this up, John. This has been such fun, but I want to ask you, out of the stories that we've covered here, is any of them your favorite? I mean, any of them that is a thumbs up good news story, even if it's wrapped up in a bad news story, or an eye roller? Where what do you think about the stories we've had here today?
Yeah, the obvious eye roller here is the SolarWinds blaming their intern. I mean, really, this just it looks bad for the company, and I don't. It just doesn't portray a good, mature incident response approach.
Right, right. Good. Okay. Well, it's been a real pleasure having you on this show, and of course on our other shows as well. I mean, you're just a fountain of information and wonderful to work with. So, where can people find out more about you, John, and what you are passionate about?
Yeah, the best place to find me individually is on LinkedIn, John Overbaugh. And then also something I'm very passionate about, two websites to go look at, bethematch.org and Fight Cancer, FYTCNCR.org. We in our family have a child battling leukemia, looking for a bone marrow donor. And bethematch.org is a great place to go sign up to be a donor. And then Fight Cancer, if you want to learn more about the struggles that minorities have in finding donors, go to fightcancer.org and read up and go sign up and become a match and save someone's life.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. I'm just going to keep you on for a second here. I want to just acknowledge two comments that we got in as well. Tom Wilcox
Sure.
saying that GitHub surfing is a real threat and DevOps hygiene at most organizations is very lax. Thank you for that comment. Yeah. And Tom also saying, second from Tom as well, that China is stepping on tech without consequence. So again, acknowledging what you were saying before about playing with a different kind of set of rules. So once again, John, I want to thank you so much for being here. John Overbaugh, who is the VP of Security at CareCentrix. We'll see you again soon. Take care. And as we just finish off here, I just want to remind you of three things. One is that tomorrow, Friday, video chat, hacking systemic risks, starts at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern. Go to CISOseries.com to register to be part of this great fun. I want to thank you also to the sponsor, TrustMap, for today. And also remember that if you like getting this news, we do the Cybersecurity Headlines news podcast every day, 6 minutes of the news that you need to know about in order to just keep on top of all the stuff that is going on. So I'll be back next week. I want to thank you for being here and your comments and your participation. I'm Steve Prentice. I want to say thank you, take care, stay safe, and we'll see you again soon.
Cybersecurity headlines are available every weekday. Head to CISOSeries.com for the full stories behind the headlines.